The Rebecca deck list that I have built for EB01. The reason there's three is there's just so many cards, so many options, so many ways to build Rebecca going into EB01 that I've had a difficult time narrowing down which deck I think is going to be the best and which one I'm going to enjoy playing the most. So the first one here is going to be based loosely off of my initial iteration of the EB06 Rebecca that I saw um, kind of proposed in a VV theory video a long time back. I've done some tooling and teching a little bit differently than how he did. Um, but there are specific cards here that I really kind of want to go over as to the reasoning that I'm going for them opposed to something else. So you might notice there's a lack of Orlumbuses. There's actually Ashrutin instead. And the biggest reason for this is that I value Ashrutin over Orlumbus right now in the way that things are currently set up until Sokka is rotated. And possibly still after that, depending on how prevalent Gecko and OP07 Lucci become, just due to the fact that he is a 6 cost, so he's much more annoying for people to have to remove. Yes, one of an Ice Age will help remove him, but if they have to expend an Ice Age to be able to remove my Dawn Reducer, I very much prefer that than allowing them to just be able to just do something like a Suru, easily do a Suru into an Absalom kind of clear. On top of that, he poses a bigger threat. He has a much larger body. 2,000 power more is pretty substantial, which means that even into swings, he's going to be harder to remove. And then on top of that, he doesn't require setup like Orlumbus does. Oftentimes, the problem I run into with Orlumbus is that some of my small characters can get removed, and I have to make the choice: do I want to pop my Orlumbus to use one of my KO effects, or do I want to play like 2 Kiroses in the same turn and not get value out of one of those Kiroses? May not be the worst play, but it's 6 Dawn opposed to a 3 Dawn investment, and sometimes that can mean a whole lot. So whereas I can just do a 6 Dawn investment on my 6 Dawn turn, where I generally only play Sabos, maybe a Rebecca into something, and this sets me up for the follow-up turn to drop an Aramaki. So of the builds, though, this is probably the one that is my least favorite of my three, just due to the fact that I'm running less boss monsters other than Gecko Moria. Gecko is very strong, but I kind of have been very much liking Aramaki Kuzan as my top end bosses and having Gecko as a backup plan. And so because of that, this is probably my least favorite build of the three that I've built, but I wanted to kind of give this option where it is a Gecko themed kind of control variant and value engine. The other big card that I kind of want to talk about is Sai. He came out in OP06. I mentioned a long time ago that he was one of the cards that I was looking forward to for Rebecca. I thought he did a lot for Rebecca, and then I didn't do a whole lot of testing for it. Sai is very good. He's very strong. I think he still adds a ton of value for Rebecca. And in this particular list, I believe that Sai adds in such a high amount of value, or just in general, I think in this list he adds a lot of value because this is a value-driven Rebecca. It's all about having more board space or more bodies on board and KOing my opponent's characters when I have the opportunity to. So what can this look like? What could I end up with as a board presence? Well, Gecko Moria into a Rebecca, into a Scarlet, getting a Sai back in hand, deploying a Brook from hand with Rebecca. Or say I have a Sai in hand, I get a Brook back, deploy it with Rebecca, so that my Brook will KO a 1 cost, not that huge. My Scarlet will then play the Sai for free. It's pretty good. Or conversely, we can also just get back to Kyros, and then Rebecca plays the Sai, and then Scarlet will play the Kyros, and Kyros will get rid of a 3 cost. So we just developed a 6k body, a 5k body, a blocker, and Gecko, which is really strong. We also have the opportunity of Gecko to get Rebecca, to get Hina, and Gecko gets Rebecca and Scarlet. Rebecca gets Hina, and Scarlet plays the Kyros, and then we've removed a 7 cost. So there's a lot of versatility there. On top of that, Sai is just a really good early sided card. So if we see Scarlet early in our opening hand with a Sai in hand, that's perfectly fine. We can turn one if we're going second, we can turn one, play Scarlet, pop Scarlet, play Sai. We've now put a card into our trash, which is fine, and we've developed a 6k body to be able to swing to my opponent the next turn, or my opponent has to really debate, oh man, do I swing, does their first swing just have a ton of Dawn to clear the one character I've played, or are they going to try to play a character and swing a lower Dawn at me? How's it going to work? It adds a lot more pressure to my opponent to have to figure out what they want to do. And oftentimes it might make my opponent actually want to swing at the side, which will balance out pretty well. Overall, I don't think this is a bad list. I like all these cards. You'll see that a lot of these cards will show up in the next two lists. But ultimately, I don't like the strictly play the Gecko Moria as your game plan. Not because it's a bad game plan, it's just personal preference. I don't like this game plan as much. I prefer more of a control style. This is much more of a value style that has control elements. So let's look at the next list. This list is a bit more of a control list. It still has a lot of tempo, it has a lot of combo. It is more of a Dressrosa oriented list, mind you. It does play 3 Luffys as our boss monsters, opposed to 4 Geckos and 2 of them. I was debating it if it's a 4-2 split or a 3-3 split. I think a 3-3 split is fine. There's arguments for a 3-4 split, 4 Geckos, 3 Luffys, but I personally don't want to mess around with tooling that too much. This one does have 1 less Kyros, and that was to make sure we had room for 3 Geckos, because we also have to have 3 Colosseums. And I don't like going too far above like 15 to 17 non-counters in the deck. And I believe this one here is sitting at exactly 15, which is a nice sweet spot for it. But let's kind of talk about the small differences that this deck has. So we have no Hinas in this list, by the way. We are not banking on the Hina combo. Instead, we are playing much more around the fact that we have Colosseum, because once Colosseum's in the list, you really need to be playing around it more. So that being the case, we're going to have Suleimans in here. Sai works really well with Colosseum. Having a 6k rush swing clear character is pretty strong for 3 Dawn. And then on top of that, we have our Rebecca Searchers to get more thinning out of the deck, because we have almost nothing but Dressrosa cards. Our non-Dressrosa cards are going to be the 3 Gravity Blades, the 3 Geckos, and 2 Brooks. So 2 Rebecca Searchers just gets us there faster, because we're running Rebecca Searchers, because we still have 3 Heroes, because we have all these low-cost characters that are all Dressrosa. We've moved back to Orlumbus. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Orlumbus when black is as prevalent as it is, because it is such an easy card for them to remove. But if we really need to set it up in the mid to late game, one of the things we can do is Orlumbus into a Sabo. And what the value of this is, if we have a Brook on board, we can KO nothing, -4, and then swing with Brook and get rid of a 5-cost character, which is actually pretty good. That's pretty strong. It's a lot of value. So thus the big reason that Brook is in this list. I do believe I was running 2 copies of Brook in the last list, similar reasons. He's just a recurable KOing character, and with a lot of static cost reduction between either Orlumbus or Hashrudin, synergizes super well with Brook. He's also recurable by Rebecca. He's recurable by Gecko. It's very, very useful card for Rebecca, and we're seeing a lot of him. A card that I didn't touch up on, because he wasn't in the last list, is Suleiman. Suleiman is basically, on the turn he comes out, can be, if he's from hand, as long as we have Colosseum, he is essentially a Hina, as long as they have a character we can swing into. And so he just -4 something. But he also gets rid of 2 cards off the top of our deck, which in the case of Rebecca is very good, and in the case of the fact that Luffy is our primary win con in this deck, very useful, because it helps us start milling through our deck. Thus, also the big reason that we kind of want Orlumbus in this build over Hashrudin is that Hashrudin doesn't add cards to our trash, whereas Orlumbus does. So if you're running Luffy, you really need to be able to fuel your trash more. Both Suleiman, Orlumbus do this, Rebecca helps do this. Your hero power, you're going to want to play it a ton. And so we're kind of, and then Kyros also helps do this. There is argument that you could drop the size and put in 2 Leos, or you can make these into 2 Rebeccas. I personally just like having the size. Again, he's just kind of a threatening body, which is super useful. He synergizes very well with Colosseum. And on a turn where we just don't really need to KO anything extra, other than maybe a 3 cost, then on our Gecko play, we can just do the simple play of Rebecca grabbing side, play the side, Scarlet playing the Kyros. There we go. We have a nice little combo there. And so ultimately, this list plays much more around Coliseum. It's much more of a Dressrosa oriented list, kind of more of a traditional Rebecca build and play style. Um, the last deck we have here is the Truly Control list. This is the list that I personally will probably be playing the most of. It is much more of a control list. It's the only one that doesn't have Psy in it, but the big focus of this list is the Aramaki Kuzan combo. So if you're unfamiliar with it, Aramaki on turn 8, if you already have a Hoshruden out, just means you get rid of a 6 cost on the turn he comes out. Otherwise, he's just a big blocker that helps stall out and give you a turn. And then on the following turn, you drop Kuzan, and Kuzan allows you to clear a 5 cost, and then with that, Aramaki then can also clear a 7 cost. So, whereas Kuzan usually is kind of a slow tempoed play on the turn he comes out, unless your opponent just has only mid-range or aggro cards, in tandem with Aramaki, just enables you to just clear their characters super easy. So, when we're then looking at this list, what are some of the other strong suits of this list? Well, we have Hound Blazes to help us get some regular early, popping power, and allows us to pair up really well into some of the other black lists. We still have Gravity Blades because I think this card is an essential at least a 3 of in every Rebecca list. This card just synergizes way too well with Hoshrudens and Orlumbuses. It's a late game destroyer, and it's a mid game tempo swinger to put back to give us back tempo in case we don't see our Armakis. We have our Hinas for cost reduction. We can do the Gecko Scarlet Rebecca Hina Heroes combo in this list, which I really like. I've put in 2 brand new searchers in this one, so because of that, I've run the Surus instead as a searchable 1K, which gives us more Dawn minusing effects. We have 3 Savos. I was debating 4, but it's really hard to find the proper space for it unless we drop down to 3 Kiroses, which we could do, but this list is so much on removal. It's arguable you could reduce it down to 3 Kiroses, go up to 4 Savos, but it's kind of an argument as to if that's necessary. I mean, you could technically do it because we have the Hound Blazes, so like I could drop this, and then we have so much removal built into this package. It's there. We can find these off of the brand news, which is super nice. Note, there is a ton of cards that are not Dressrosa in this, so your leader ability does have a decent chance of missing, which ultimately can stink if it hits one of these big characters, or these events. But there's also just Sewer goes to trash, not that big a deal. Hina goes to trash, not that big a deal. Can kind of stink if you miss this. So it is a little bit more iffy to use your hero ability, your leader ability in this list, but sometimes it's just a necessary evil to start filling up trash and doing the things you need to do. If Burke goes to trash again, not a big deal. So just be a little cautious with that one. But this one has a lot more control elements. We have 3 Hound Blazes, and then we have another 3 Hound Blazes. FYI, if you didn't know that, that's what Aramaki does. Ultimately, I am a fan of this list, but it is a lot riskier. As I said, I kind of like to stick around at most 15, 16, maybe 17 non-counter cards, and I believe this list is currently sitting at, let's see, we have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Which is kind of what I'm running right now in my current OP06 list. This is roughly the number that I'm running. So it is high risk, high reward. Whereas the other lists are probably a little bit more consistent. This high risk, high reward playstyle is kind of a fun one, and I think you can kind of do some variations on this. You can switch out some of these cards into the other lists, and vice versa, and you can find what you like. I personally just really like Aramaki Kuzan, and that's kind of why I made this list, is just to have one. And I like that control feel that they give. But for you, maybe it's going to be this more kind of mid-rangey combo-y with geckos, or maybe it's going to be the hybrid between, where it's a bit more of control, but a little bit more, but still has a lot of combo. And is a bit more Dressrosa oriented. Maybe this is the style that you want to play because you played Rebecca in OP04, and this plays a lot more closely to that than it does to a purely control list, like the one that is kind of a pseudo Sokka list after this. But let me know what you guys think. Tell me which deck list is your favorite, if one of these 3 piques your interest, or if maybe you have your own and you have some changes, or you have some questions about characters or cards, or considerations that you want to have made for it. Feel free to leave it down in the comments below. Like the video, hit the subscribe button. And later this week, keep an eye out. I might be playing some Rebecca on Sim, or I might play it on my Twitch stream. But until then, guys, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye, guys.